In this topic, we will look at developing a Power Pivot data model in Power BI. This demonstration adds a Power Pivot data model to the AdventureWorks Sales Analysis Workbook. It retrieves data from 3 different data connections: Access Database, Corporate Data Warehouse and Internal Workbook Table, and relates them together to form a single data experience for the user. The data model is then enhanced with a date table, time analysis, friendly names, hierarchies and hidden columns. Finally, the data model is enriched with calculated columns and calculated fields. So first of all, we will look at importing data to create tables. Then we'll look at relating tables and enhancing the data model with hierarchies. And finally, we'll move on to enriching the data model with calculated columns and calculated fields. Now, the first thing we notice is that Power Pivot is not available to us. So to enable it, we go to the File menu, and then we will go to the Add-ins page, which we see under Options. And then we will enable one of the COM add-ins here, and we see Power Pivot just there in the middle. So now we see that the Power Pivots tab appears to us now. So what we're going to do now is we're going to access table from an Access spreadsheet. So to do that, let's see where our data is. So in the Home ribbon, what we're going to do is insert data, and we are going to first of all take the data into the Power Pivot system. So we click on Power Pivot, then we click on Manage. When Power Pivot starts, we go to the Home table, and this is where we see where we can take our data from. So we're going to take external data sources, and we are going to take it from Access. So to do that, we go to From Database, and then we look for Access. Now I'm going to navigate to my file, which is on the D drive here. Power BI, under the Demo, then we look for the Resources folder, and we find our Access file just there. We can see the test connection succeeded, so we'll click Next. What we're going to do now is we're going to select from a list of tables, and we want data from the Employee table. And we're going to change the name of that so it looks nicer, and we're going to call it Salesperson. Now if we go to Preview and Filter, this will allow us to decide which columns we're going to take. Now we're not going to take all of the columns across. So what we're going to do is deselect some of them. If we click the button here, then it means we've deselected all of them. So we only want the Employee ID, we want the first name, and we want the last name, and we want the photo, and we want region. Once we've taken all of these items, we look for the Is Salesperson column header, and then what we want to do is just take the people who are salespersons. So to do that, we're going to filter and just restrict it so that we only have salespeople. We know that because they have a yes in their field. Once we've done that, we'll click OK. And then we click on the Finish tab. What we'd like to do here though is take across some more data. So we're going to select the product table as well. We want to preview it and filter that too. We don't want the product description column, so we're going to remove that. This is because PowerPivot is not optimized to store large strings of data. Then we're going to take the sales table as well. Again, we don't want to take all of the columns, so we are going to remove just some of these columns. We want to deselect the order column. We're not going to take that one across. We don't want the line column as well. And we don't want unit cost either. And it's at the end. Now we click OK, and to finish this, we complete the wizards by pressing the Finish button. So now the tables have been added and the data is now loaded into the data model. There we are. We can click on the Details link, and what that does is it shows us that the two relationships were added to the model, and we can see them there. Employee ID for sales was added to employee ID in the employee table, and the sales product ID was related to the product ID as well. So once we've double checked that, we can click OK, and we can close. And now we start to see our data. So what we want to do now is we can create a table from any valid query. This allows joining tables together to produce a single flattened table result. So on the Home ribbon tab, which is where we are here, we're going to click on Existing Connections. Once we've done that, we want to launch the table import wizard, and to do that we select the AW Sales connection, and then we click on Open. So to do that, we click on the connection, then we click on Open. Here we want to write a query that will specify the data to import. We have one here, which is the reseller query. We select the reseller ID, the reseller name, city, state and country from the geography table, and we're just going to copy that. Click on the Next button, and we copy our query in, and then we rename it to reseller. Then we click Finish. When we see the security warning, we just click OK, and we can see here that the data has successfully been transferred. So what we want to do now is to connect and get data from a SQL Server database. So to do that, in the Home ribbon tab, we're going to get the data from a database, and this time we're going to take it from SQL Server. So for the moment our server name is just simply going to be localhost, and then in the drop down list what we're going to do is select the AdventureWorks DW 2012 database. We click on Next. We're going to select the corporate date view, and to do that we click on Next. And what we see here is if we go down the bottom, we see that there is a view called V Corporate Date. We're going to change the name of that one so it comes up as Date. And now we're going to click Preview and Filter. We don't want all of the columns, however. We only want to take the Date column, and then we want to take Month Key, then we want to take Month Label, and then we want to take fiscal quarter label, and then we want to take fiscal year label as well. And then we're going to click OK, and that should take all the data across. When we click and finish, and our date table has been taken across from SQL Server. Finally, a table can be linked from an Excel table within the same workbook. So, for example, now if we go back to the Excel workbook, we can look for the sales region worksheet here. Now we want to do is select this whole table. Sales region, that gives us the actual table itself. So now in the Power Pivot model, we can add it to the model here by pressing this button. And now in the Power Pivot window, what we see down here is that the icon is used to denote a linked table. We're going to rename that one. And we're going to rename the table to Sales Region. What we're going to do now is hide that when we go back to Excel. I'm going to save it first of all. And now we're going to hide it, because users will start to get confused if they see it in Power Pivot and they see it in Excel as well. So let's pop that there, and off it goes. So the next step is relating tables and enhancing the data model with hierarchies. Relationships can be created between the tables, so we don't need to use VLOOKUP to do that, for example. So now if we go to Power Pivot and the Home ribbon tab, we're going to go back to Power Pivot here. Now in the Home tab, what we will do now is look for the diagram view. We can create relationships by dragging and dropping the following columns. So for example, sales date can be related to different dates. I'm just going to reduce. That looks better. And we'll bring the tables closer in together. So what we're going to do here is drag from sales date over to date. And we are going to take from the sales reseller ID across to the reseller ID here. And then what we're going to do is take the salesperson region and we're going to put that in the region table. We know that region is hiding over here. So what we can do now is reset the layout so that it looks a bit better. So what we need to do now is mark the dates table as the date table on its own. So I'm just going to save that, then go back to Power Pivot, and let's mark the dates table. So to do that, we can right click on the date table and select Go To. On the Design ribbon tab, what we're going to do is mark the as dates table, and then we're going to select mark as date table. In this way, Power Pivot knows this is our dates table. We're going to use the date and click OK. So what we want to do now is rename some of this. So instead of month label, let's rename it to month. There's an L in the end, so let's get rid of that. we're going to rename the fiscal quarter label so that it is simply just called quarter. And we're going to rename fiscal year label to be year as well. What we can do now is when we look at the month column in particular, we can see that the values in this column are sorted by default alphabetically. What we need to do is take the month key, which provides a numeric sequence for sorting the month column values. So let's click cancel there. So if we take the month value there, and what we'll do is in the home ribbon tab we are going to look for sort by column, and the column that we want to sort by is called month key. Now what we see is that the months are now sorted in chronological order, which makes much more sense to the business users. So what we can do now is set up a hierarchy. So to do that, let's go back to the diagram view, and to maximise the table, what we need to do is go to the top right hand corner of the dates table. We can maximise it there. Now we've done that, we can multi-select some of the columns in order to create a hierarchy. So let's select month, quarter and year. We do that by pressing the Control key at the same time. So now if we right click in these columns, we can create hierarchy, and we can rename the hierarchy to fiscal, which we rename. And then what we can do now is multi-select all the 5 columns, and then we can hide these from the client tools. It will give us a better user experience. Then we can minimize the table again. So what we can do now is do the same for the products table as well. So we maximize it. We will select category, subcategory and product columns. We'll create a hierarchy again, and what we're going to do is call that products. And once we've done that, we're going to hide the columns we're not using. We're going to keep the colour one, select the rest, hide from client tools. Now let's minimize that. Then we'll go to the reseller table as well. We'll maximize that one, and we're going to make a geography hierarchy, and we're going to use country, state, city and reseller. We right click, create a hierarchy, and that hierarchy is going to be called geography. We press return. Now what we're going to do now is hide all of these columns, hide from client tools, looks good, then minimize those. So what we can do now is change the sales region table, maximize that one, include a hierarchy, and we're going to call this one sales region based on group, country, and we are going to call that sales region table. Create a hierarchy, press return, and we're going to hide the rest of those columns and minimize the table. So that starts to look better now from the user perspective. So now we've created our hierarchies, we can enrich the data model with calculated columns and calculated fields. We can use our new hierarchies to do that: sales region, product, employee, and our fiscal one. So to do that, we're going to create calculated columns. We're going to extend the table definition using DAX, which is Data Analysis Expressions. To do that, we'll do that with the salesperson table, which is over here. I'm going to select that one, go to, and that takes us to the data. So we're going to click inside the last column, and in the formula bar we're going to select first name. So to do that, we do salesperson, then it auto-suggests for us salesperson. Now the first name, we don't want it squashed up too much. So we insert some space behind it, and then we'll choose salesperson last name as well. And now we simply press enter, and that will give us a much more readable name. So we're going to rename the column itself to salesperson. That will make much more sense to the business users. What we want to do now is select the employee ID first column, and we want to hide it. So we want to keep these ones, so let's keep employee, and we'll hide region as well. So now what we're going to do now is create a calculated column called salesperson, called sales amount, which is based on the DAX expression, and we're going to do that in the sales table. So now we click on sales at the bottom, and we're going to create a new column, again equals sign, and it's going to be sales quantity multiplied by sales unit price. Press enter, and that gets populated. So it's quite simple to use existing columns in order to generate new data. We're going to rename that as well. That's going to be renamed sales amount. And that looks better. So what we're going to do now is load some data in the data model and optimize it for filtering, sorting and aggregating. In the sales amount column, what we want to do is click the down arrow here. We want to sort the columns from the largest to smallest, so we can do that quite easily. So what we get here is a big query performance, which is achieved, and it's better than what we see in the native Excel table. So the data is stored in memory, and it's optimized for this type of query, even if there was 1,000,000 rows. So what we want to do now is create some calculated fields which allow for the aggregation of the data model also by using DAX. So to do that, let's collect the product ID column, and we want to choose distinct count here. So select all of it, and we select distinct count from the AutoSum formula here. And we see we have the calculation down the bottom of this page just here. So in the formula bar, rename the calculated field to distinct products, and that's going to start to look better, isn't it? So on the right, click the calculation, and then we select Format. So what we do is right click the bottom here, the calculation, and we pick Format. In the formatting window, we're going to have this as a number, then we're going to format it as a whole number, and we're going to use the 1000 separator as well. So what we're going to do now is create another calculated field called units based on the sum of the quantity. So we click in this column, click on AutoSum, and we're going to call that units. And we're going to format that as well. So it's going to be number, 1000 separators, and it's going to be a whole number. Then we click OK. So we can format that the same as we did with distinct products, and then what we can do now is create a calculated field called sales based on the sum of the sales amount column. AutoSum. We are going to call that sales, simply sales. And we're going to format, that looks quite good the way it is, with the currency, so we'll leave it there. And then what we're going to do now is hide the columns in the sales table. So we're going to keep sales amount, unit price, we'll get rid of that one. Get rid of, well, products we will keep, reseller, we'll hide that one too. Employee ID, we'll hide that one. And we'll leave it at that. So now we can review the data model. So to do that, we go to the diagram view, and what we can see now is that we have a data model as a collection of 3 different data connections: corporate access database, external data field, and internal workbook table. We've related them together, enhanced with a date table for time analysis. We've got friendly names as well, and we have created some hierarchies and some hidden columns. Finally, the data model is enriched with calculated columns and fields. What we want to do now simply is save the workbook. So let's have a quick look at the workbook size. See the size here is just over a meg there. It's less than the original solution, so we're going to leave that there for the next demonstration.